Bonjour, Montréal. Qu'est-ce que c'est ça? That was terrible. I was told this was a lively crowd. And I need to prepare you for rooting for the hockey game tonight, all right? So encore une fois, I'll give you one more time. I'm going to try it again. Let's see if I get a reaction from the crowd. Ready? Bonjour, Montréal. Much better. All right, give yourself a round of applause. That was good. So, social CMO. Somehow I managed to get that nickname over the last couple of years. And while it's an interesting label and kind of hard to live up to, it does give me a typical way to start every presentation. Pretty much every other speaker says, put away your mobile device. My answer is, take out your mobile device, go to your favorite Facebook page, go to Twitter, and as a social CMO, I'll set the precedent. I'll start by tweeting. Notice it's on a BlackBerry. Canadians, go. And actually say, on stage, here at C2 MTL, so that's the hashtag, C2 MTL, looking forward to connecting with the crowd. Retweet me, and I'll connect with you later. Now, you notice I said looking forward to connecting with the crowd. The desire to connect is innate in all of us as human beings. It releases endorphins in our brain. It turns out there's a whole series of scientific experiments that show when you connect with somebody in real life, or even in social media, oxytocin, this is a chemical in your body, increases. And if oxytocin increases, then it turns out your stress level goes down and your mood lifts. So all those companies that say that you should be off social media are missing the point. Social media is good for you. It's good to connect. Now, while everyone has this human desire to connect, I think I personally, maybe more than most, have always craved connections. It's why I try to turn everything I do into somehow a connection environment, even a presentation like this. And I think the reason might have to do with my upbringing. It might have to do with the fact that I grew up in a really small town, and I went to a very small school. Now, I know if you're in the audience, you might say, how small, Jonathan? Well, this is a picture of my second grade class. I'm the person in the bottom left-hand corner in case you can't recognize me just yet. I'm 7 years old. I haven't yet discovered the joys of Twitter. I don't think it had been invented just yet. And I went to the same school with the same class for 12 years, from first grade all the way through graduation. In graduation, there were 13 of us. Okay, I'll tell you a secret. One of them was an exchange student that we imported from New Zealand. So my world was not very big. My connections were quite small. There were not very many of us. But I learned early on the difference between the quantity of connections and the quality of connections. Deep, meaningful, quality connections. Now, something else made me quite a bit different than everybody else in the small town. Maybe I can see a little picture of it in the second grade there. And that is, both my parents are European. So once, sometimes twice a year, we got on a plane and we flew internationally. And we spent several weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, with cousins, with friends, with families all around the world. I traveled so much when I was little, but by the time I got to my 12th birthday, I'd already been to 20 countries. And I craved it. My world expanded dramatically. I met people, strange and wonderful people, that spoke different languages, had different cultures, and weren't like those 15 other people in my class. And while I made those temporary connections, by the time I got back home to this small little town with only one stoplight, I couldn't keep those connections alive. My world collapsed again. Now I tried, but let me give you a hint. This was the 70s. There was no email yet. There was no good way to create these connections. So what did I do? I relied on this ancient art form. Anybody remember this thing? This is an ancient art form of how to create a connection off of long distances. It's called a letter. Now I realize most of the people in this room are too young and too hip to remember how to write, let alone to what a letter is. But this wasn't just any letter. This was a special airmail letter issued by the United States Post Office with ultra-thin tissue-like paper because it has magical qualities that it can go across all the miles and reach the people that I wanted to connect to. It was good, but it had some trouble. First of all, it took like 10 days to get from here to Paris, or from here to Germany, or from here to Russia, or all the places that I visited. And by the time I got a letter back, it was usually more than a month. So it was hard to have real conversations. The connections were tenuous. They weren't real. So my world had expanded. I'd gotten a taste, but it was still quite condensed. Now, of course, over time, my world got bigger. I graduated from this small little town. I went away to university. My very first class had 500 people in the room. You can imagine the shock I had. The whole university was bigger than the town that I grew up in. Today, I work for a company with 67,000 employees, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area with more than 7 million inhabitants. Some days on my morning commute, I think I see most of those 7 million inhabitants on the roads next to me. And while the number of people I know in real life has increased, probably by more than 100, there's a troubling trend that I see. Universities, companies, hometowns, especially over time, tend to be homogenous. They tend to be populated not by people that look the same, but by people that increasingly think and act the same and go to the same paces. It feels like where I grew up, even though there's millions of more people there. This is why probably I was an early adopter for social media, trying to find things that were unlike the things that are around me. I joined LinkedIn, I think, in 2003. I started a personal blog in 2006. I got on Twitter 2 years after that. And those 3 networks alone, I've created 200,000 active connections. But look, it's not about that ego number. It's not about the ego metric. It's about the variety, the diversity of opinion. Simultaneously, in one day on all those networks, I can have conversations about hockey and other sports, about politics, about arts, about psychology, about anything that interests me or things I've never dreamed about before. And the crave of those connections is the heart of what's informed me and made me what today. It's also what I think helps me do my job better than I used to do it. For those of you that aren't marketing people, and I know there's quite a few in the room, but not all of us, there's an interesting debate going on right now in marketing. And that debate is between the art and the science of marketing. Some people think it's more important to understand the brand. That's the art. And people came up in the background of brand. And other people say, no, brand's gone. It's now time to be digital. That's the science of marketing. And while the debate is fun to have, and I've had it myself on social media, and it's clear that there's a bit of a trend. We're going from madmen to mathmen. The reality is this is not an and conversation. You have to have both. And I think this debate misses the entire point. In fact, to me, the heart of what marketing is 2 things. The first is tapping into the human psychology and understanding an unmet need, an unmet passion among a small group of people, maybe a large group of people, and then designing a product or service to deliver that. That's inbound, not outbound. That's not a billboard. The second part of marketing is then establishing a preference for a specific product or service into a specific number of people. Not all 7 billion, but a specific number. Inbound and outbound. And you're probably not surprised that I think social and connections is a great way of doing this. I think this so much that when we got started, I fundamentally said when I became and got promoted to CMO, everyone should become social. Turns out that was a big mistake. Or in the words of social media, #fail. Why? Because everyone wanted to please Jonathan. So there were hundreds of new Twitter accounts, hundreds of new Facebook pages, dozens of people tried to blog. We created digital chaos. We confused the world. Bloggers would do 1, 2, or maybe 3 posts and then run out of things to say. It's hard to write. It's much easier to tweet. People would tweet 10, 20, 30, 40 times a day, but we created an echo chamber. People were just talking to each other, not having conversations. And we created more than 100 new web properties. Several years later, we've now tamed that zoo. We've reduced our online premise by more than 50%. When people come to me and say, I want a blog, I say, great, write 10 new entries And when you've written the 10th entry, then post your first one. 99% of the people don't have stamina to write 10. It's a good way to making sure that it's authentic. This is why when people ask me, Jonathan, you're the social CMO, what's your social strategy? I say, I don't have one. It's a shock from people sometimes. Why? Because I say, what are our business goals? What do we want to accomplish in sales? Do social. What do you want to accomplish in development? Do social. What do you want to accomplish in support, in marketing, in a presentation with an audience? Social can help that. Social is an enabler, not a goal in itself. We believe so firmly in the power of connections. In creating engagement, we created our own network. We have something called the SAP Community Network with 2 million members on it. Now, I realize, of course, remember, 2 million is not a lot if you're a general purpose network. But if you're a technology company, 2 million members with tens of millions of connections that are active every single day is quite big. And I mentioned development. One of the things we want to do is reduce the distance between the people that write our software and the people that use our software. So we created something called Idea Place, which allows us to crowdsource directly from people that want to use SAP technology what should be in our products. And so now our small and medium business product, something called Business One, more than half the features come directly from the crowd. People submit ideas, they get improved by other people, they get voted on, then we put them in. In fact, we've been so successful, more than 200,000 ideas, that we started outsourcing and giving the IP and the ideas to third parties so they can do it themselves. As successful as this was, though, think about that homogenous community. These are people that already know SAP and want to use our products. What if I did want to connect with all 7 billion people on the planet? How could I do that? Why would I want to do that? Turns out there's a reason. One of our best-selling products is something called analytics, helping people make decisions based on their brain rather than based on their gut, what the data says. And historically, we sold that well to big companies, but not so well to small companies. Small companies, family-run businesses says, I don't care what your data says. I don't care what says what item to put on my menu, where to put my drugstore, all that. I know this better than the data does. So we decided to take a different approach to how to connect with them. Rather than connecting directly, we wanted to tap into their passion, what they believed, and what's more passionate than sports. People love data in sports. They think that their team is going to score on a breakaway. They know we're going to come back from 3-1 down and win in the 7-game series. The data may or may not support that belief. Now, I was going to show you an example in hockey, but I was told that if it didn't show the Habs winning, I might get rushed off stage. So I thought, all right, I'll pick something less emotional for this audience, and I'll pick American basketball, and I'll use some data from the National Basketball Association. They partnered with us to develop a website, which you can check out yourself, which is called nba.com/stats. And if the video starts, it does indeed. This website has all that digital data. Now, at first blush, it just looks like a regular website. It just looks like information. But the key here is that it's a live website. You can see information in lots of different ways. You can invent your own statistics. Maybe you want to know how many dribbles before a shot was taken in the last quarter of a basketball game after the team had traveled for 3 days on the road and had never won. Turns out that's a pretty important stat. Or you can zoom in to a particular person and check out how that particular person is checking out. So if I was using my mobile device now, I would actually want to go zoom in and look at Kevin Durant. And let's see if this, the video is not actually moving. So, okay, so we'll see if this video gets actually moving now. Thank you for backstage help. So I'm going to click and look at Kevin Durant. Some of you may know he was the most valuable player. I see legions of statistics about him. This looks very common, but I'd like to see this visually as well. And if you could see the data, everyone believes Kevin shoots better from the right. It turns out the data shows he shoots better from the left, except for deep shots. And deep shots, except for that one green dot, see where I'm zooming over to now? He's never done well at all. But let's see what happened to that one deep shot. Let's make it bigger.
Here's Lamb. Knocked away by Johnson. Durant is going to pull up for the lead, and he drills it. Kevin Durant with 51. 119, 118, 1.7 seconds left here in double overtime.
So what have we done? We've integrated analytics with the actual video to tap in the emotion of people who love sports, to realize that how they think they feel about what's going on and what's really going on is maybe not the sense. And then people that use this tool, and I can't tell you how many people have used this tool, but I'll tell you it's in the millions, and say, maybe what I think about basketball and what's really going on isn't the same. I should try that in my business, are then given a free copy and asked to engage with us as well. It's using the passion and the connection they have with basketball and transferring it to a boring tech company. What's happened since we started doing things like this in basketball, in US football, in hockey, in soccer? Sales of analytics to small businesses have skyrocketed. They're up by almost 3 times they were before, because human beings that don't think about technology but do think about their passions suddenly get connected to a brand and an environment they didn't know before. Now, I started this presentation saying connections are the most important thing to me. Connections to solve business problems, connections to do basketball, and I wanted to connect with you guys as well. So I'd like to see if that has actually worked. So if we could switch over to the screen here. Not too bad. Turns out I've picked up 21 new followers just in the 20 minutes I've been on stage. Says, apparently I'm hating on the Raptors. I'm not really hating on any particular basketball fan whatsoever. That person I definitely have to follow in and apologize. Maybe I'll do that in French. It looks like that somebody else wants to know what the ROI of this. It turns out it's extraordinarily high. You heard me say that 3x. The point being is connections are the ultimate human mechanism. Connections are what made us people. We sometimes forget that in a spew of marketing messages, in a spew of outbound communication. The good news is, remember, connections are ridiculously important for me as a human being. And best I can tell by a brief view of social media, I did manage to connect with some of you. That means my oxytocin level stayed fairly high. My stress level is low. My mood has gone up. And when I get backstage, I'll respond to as many things as well. I hope you have a great event, and maybe after this presentation, you'll remember one short thing. The C in C2 Montreal stands for connections. Thank you for your time.